We believe in lack. We believe that lack has to be part of our lives. We create these stories and we create this conditioning within our own subconscious brain that makes us think, I have to have a job where I don't like it a third of the time. And I'm sitting here being like, I actually like everything that I do. Here's the thing. The reason that's happening is because
Today, we're joined by David K. Richards, a visionary educator and entrepreneur who's redefining learning. From founding Growth Public Schools to launching Changemaker Micro Schools, David is on a mission to disrupt traditional education and empower both students and teachers.
Was it always kind of, I'll call like the entrepreneurial spirit of the rebellious side, totally like break the system and do something different?
it's really about self-awareness, like knowing your body, knowing your patterns. All that self-awareness has really allowed me to say, this is what I really am good at, and this is what I'm not good at. And so I don't need to be messing around with things that I'm not good at.
What was it like to see that first charter school come to life, and then kind of what caused the shift from that point?
So I literally went from the guy who had aligned to like Mark Zuckerberg's wife, talking to all these sort of high-powered people, to begging a mom, like, do you want to enroll your 5-year-old in the charter school? All happened in like a 1-month period.
People listening from a micro school perspective, what is the vision? What does the micro school look like?
I really appreciate that question because I think
Welcome to another episode of Built for This, Stories of a Maverick, where we jump into moments, mindsets, and movements that shape resilient leaders and change makers. I'm Jenna, and I'm joined today by David Richards, who's redefined what it means to lead from the inside out. He is a visionary in the world of education and transformation, from founding Growth Public Schools to now launching Changemaker Micro Schools. His journey is a testament to the power of healing, intuition, and purpose-led leadership. His story moves beyond traditional success. It's about reclaiming identity, embracing inner truth, and creating spaces where young people and educators alike can thrive. Today, we're going to jump into the intersection of trauma, trust, and transformation, and how leaning into love and listening can reshape the future of learning. Welcome.
Thank you. That was a great introduction. I feel like I should hire you to be my PR rep or something.
I'm available. I can help out.
Awesome.
I appreciate it. I would love to kind of start off sort of beginning of kind of a little bit of sort of how you grew up and kind of the beginnings of the career, because I know it's a little kind of non-traditional and I love to kind of piece those things together. So kind of talk to me about education from a high school perspective, your experience, and then kind of what happened next from a university perspective.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating because as I reflect back on it, there's like these through lines. I've always been like a teacher, a coach, a mentor. So whatever space I was in, that was always a through line. So I want everyone to hear that. It's you kind of know when you're like 5, 10, 15 years old, really what you want to quote unquote be, but you let all these other distractions kind of talk you out of it. And so my story is kind of similar to that. I always wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't really want to be a teacher because my school experience was not very great. And, like my parents got divorced when I was really young, and dad left with a younger woman. Mom had a nervous breakdown. So it was like a lot of trauma at 8 years old. And the school system, I was in a suburban kind of affluent area. My parents did a good job of finding good schools and like living right on the outside of the skirt of the boundary so they could get me into the good schools. But part of the problem with that is then I became the poor kid growing up with the rich kids in the good school. And so I kind of went under the radar. And, during this 8-year-old time, none of my teachers, even though I was having all this, like not really doing well, and no one ever noticed. And I think that's really summarizes my whole K through 12 experience. No one ever really noticed. I was quiet. I was shy. I wasn't doing podcasts. I was very shy. I was a kid that everybody overlooked. And then I went through high school in a similar vein. Like I ended up missing 1 year of high school. When you get your transcript, it was like 182 days, which is a whole school year.
Wow.
And that was because I could show up a few days a week and still get A's and B's because it was just mediocrity. Again, at one of the best public, high schools in the area. And that's the story for a lot of people in these kind of mediocre expectations. So, and then I ended up at community college and I felt like I really love learning. And so I'm going to take something I enjoy. And I was like, I love history. I love psychology. So I started taking those classes, and all of a sudden I got that spark for learning. So in spite of the school system, I was able to fall in love with learning again because of the community college system, and completely loved learning, and just decided I'm going to a 4-year university. I'm going to, transcend my poverty story. I'm going to make something for my life. And I did that, and I ended up transferring to UC Berkeley, which is a really prestigious, university out here in California. And then I went and got my master's degree from Stanford. But in between, I spent time doing banking, even though I wanted to be a teacher. And that was part of the override your intuition with logic and outside external.
Yeah. It feels like
Right?
also I find a lot of people get into investment banking or something that's going to be the quote unquote like safe path and like it's a
Yep.
steady job. You're going to make good money. You can kind of move around. You can work your way up in those big banks. So like don't be risky about anything you
Yep.
want to do.
That's exactly what happened to me. I ended up teaching Spanish when I studied abroad in Costa Rica, came back when I graduated, and I was like literally applying for banking jobs and business jobs. That was one side of my brain. And then the other side of the brain was like, I want to be a teacher and be creative and teach about Spanish and history, whatever. And so I found this part-time job, and it was so hard because I had no training. It was middle school, which was a really difficult age. And I was like, I'm getting the heck as far away as I can away from this situation.
Yeah.
But then I found my way back there. So in my 20s, my wife and I ended up moving to Washington, D.C., and I found a job as a corporate banker, and I climbed the ladder really fast. And I was 2 blocks from the White House wearing a 3-piece suit, all the
Yeah.
things you're talking about. And I looked around and I said, these are not my people. Like,
Yeah.
they're not really alive. And so I started asking about my age now, like late 40s. I'd be like, so tell me how you ended up in banking and tell me what you love about your career. And this was
Yeah.
their answer. I have a great house. I get off at 5 o'clock every day and I take my boat out on the weekends. And I'm like, well, what about the 9 to 5? And they were like, hey, I'm doing well. I'm getting paid well. I have a retirement plan. But they never lit up about their actual 9 to 5 job. And these
Yeah.
were people that I was supposed to be, trying to become, right? These are the people that I was like looking up to. So
Yeah.
at that moment, I found this book called Finding Your Own North Star. I read it cover to cover, found it in the bookstore, and I couldn't put it down. And I was like, I want to be a teacher. So I quit my job. And that was when intuition really, I didn't know it all, all the language now, but I really just had this feeling in my heart that the banking was not the way. That was kind of the secure, like you said, safe and secure. So I just quit my job and I went to Stanford at that point. And even that story, I was looking for like master's degrees that weren't teaching certifications because
Yeah.
I still was like, I can't be a teacher. Like I need to make money,
Yeah.
I still was trying to find a way to get out of it, but I eventually chose Stanford because they had a master's program and a teacher certification.
Okay.
And so I felt like I could kind of get the best of both worlds. If I didn't love teaching, I at least had a master's from Stanford and it would work out. And then I just totally fell in love with the kids. I fell in love with teaching. And that's when I was able to find this great charter school and really have this amazing career in education that's led me to this moment.
And I'm curious, when you made the decision to quit, like the answer, but again, like you mentioned, you were kind of looking for every excuse to like not do it or wait a little bit longer because of the what if. And like, what if this all blows up? What if I lose everything? What if I was like, okay, maybe I'll have to go back to serving. Like, do I really want to do that if all else fails? Like, I was good at it. I'm good with people. But did you I always call it like outsourcing it first, where you like ask a bunch of people, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and you're kind of waiting for that's stupid, don't do it. And then you
Yeah,
end up a little while, like, and eventually hitting the brick wall, and you're like, I just have to do it. Was there a kind of
absolutely.
conversations where you were like, oh, okay, I'm not getting maybe the excitement back that I'm hoping for?
100%. The only person that supported is my current wife, my then girlfriend. No one in my family supported me. They're like, "Are you crazy? You're the one who's actually making money. We need you to help us financially." And they're like, "You're the Wonder Boy." That's literally the nickname they have for me. You're the Wonder Boy. Like, what are you doing going into education? Like, we need you to go make some money and help us all out. And so my family was not supportive. My friends thought I was absolutely crazy. And so that book is by Martha Beck, who I call the OG life coach, and she talks about the voice of the collective other. And that's where you're in trouble, because when you have an intuitive knowing, I think, Jenna, you and I are at the point now where we've created the average. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like, I think we know now not to just go and ask everybody. And
Yeah.
actually, your family's the worst person to start with because they want to protect you. They want you to be safe. And they're like, wait, what? So now we kind of know, like, shop the idea with the closest people and then take it a little bit at a time. But
Yeah.
what I recommend is really, finding your people, because everyone told me I was crazy. But I just knew it was an inner knowing that I felt like I had to follow. But then as you go through the process, you start to really create your own suffering. because you're like, well, I shouldn't actually do a teaching certification. Well, maybe I will do this, or maybe I will do that, or my dad said I should be a business guy, so maybe but it all worked out. In the end, it all worked out. And then like the little signs, the moment you say yes to your calling or to your intuitive truth, that night I went to dinner with friends, and my friend was like, hey, I have like 6 people in town. And I'm like, oh, where are they from? She's like, they're all doing Teach for America. They're all teachers in Philly. And I was like, what? So I'm like, hey, what do you think? Should I be a teacher? I'm like, yes. So immediately I met random people that started telling me that it was a good idea, even though all the people close to me said it wasn't.
Yeah, I love it. And I always think I call it like the feeling when it takes a while and trusting that feeling in your body to know. And
Yes.
then everybody tries to like your head says one thing, your heart says another. And
Yes.
the head has all the stories of everybody else that's ever told you or you've told yourself. And
Yes.
then your heart's like,
Yes.
hey, but like you really love it. You should go this way. And as soon as you can kind of
Yes.
figure out what that practice is to put those two things in alignment, all of a
Yes.
sudden you're just like, oh, this is what it feels like to kind of move as myself, move in integrity with who I've
Yes.
decided I am. And I'm curious if you have anything in your body that signals when you're kind of inching out the wrong direction to pull it back in. If you
Yeah.
like
Well,
that, like,
yeah.
oh, that
Yeah.
ping. I call it like the ping where I know I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not it.
Absolutely. No, I think you get really good at being embodied and kind of knowing, to the point now where I was just thinking the other day where I told like a small lie, which I don't do anymore. It was funny, we do that all the time. It was
Yeah.
very small, and then for like a week I was like, oh, that felt wrong, like felt weird.
Yeah.
So I started to notice when I'm not aligned with truth, like like when I'm talking to people or on truth
Yeah.
within myself. And so yeah, my body always speaks to me and always tells me. And I actually have two frameworks for how I deal with the kind of logical brain and the emotional brain. So there's the Heath brothers. I think it's called, the book called Switch, I believe, but they talk about the elephant and the rider.
Yeah.
You know this one?
I love
Yeah.
that book. Yeah.
So okay, so basically the elephant is your emotional brain, part of your brain, and the rider is your logical part. And you literally picture like a rider yourself, the person on top of this huge elephant. And if you don't shape the path or let that logical part of your brain understand what's going on, the elephant's going to be going crazy and like throwing you off, and you're just totally off, right? And so what I've learned even recently with my newest, with Changemaker Micro Schools, is I have to get very specific with that logical brain, like create a budget, create a strategic plan. I have to do all of that logical stuff, or that sort of emotional part of me will be out of control. And so that's one framework, which is very, scientific and all of that. The other one I use is the divine child and the wounded inner child. So that's more, from the spiritual path of the divine child is usually like your 4 or 5 year old version of yourself. And really it's just like taking the cues and the clues from the universe and spirit or whatever you call it, and just totally being free, right? That's the most free version of yourself. And then you have your wounded inner child that's like, oh my gosh, remember what happened when I was 8? And oh my gosh, this happened, that happened. It's all coded into your subconscious. And that's like most of us operate 95% from that, right? The subconscious programming. And so what I try and do is like in a meditation, like really connect with my divine inner child and be like, hey, what are we doing today? It's like, we're going to do this, and like, we're going to build this and create this and talk to Jenna, and it's going to be so much fun. And then I'm like, okay, but wounded inner child, like talk to me about what you need. And they're like, well, I need you to make sure your internet's working when you talk with Jenna, because last time it didn't work. I need you to, I need you to think about what's this and what's that. So it's
Yeah.
like a structure to create just that safety within yourself, but at the same time, lean into that best version of yourself.
Yeah, and anytime I get that feeling too, I always have to notice what changes in the way I'm carrying myself. That's a big signal that I had to learn a lot about, and then I have my names for my, um coping or defense mechanisms that have been created for me that are like very helpful and definitely pushed me through in some areas and allowed me to be a high performer. But also to like look into why, like, oh, this is when that person shows up is like not really great for me. And like this is how we create damage. And so anytime I think it comes up where there's an element of like, "Oh, I might be rejected in this situation," or like, "I feel like already I'm not enough," and I have to like I can already feel myself like tensing up and getting a little bit like stronger in the chest and almost like ready to fight. I'm like, "Okay, rejected Regina George is coming out. We don't need her right now. Let's talk to her and like calm her down so she can just come back to like being from a place of love." And I mean, it's always, as we know, like a evolution. It's never perfect. We continue to evolve and grow, and our survival mechanisms can get pretty smart and change. So we don't
Yeah.
always recognize them right away.
Yep. Exactly.
But I'm curious, from deciding, okay, teaching, I love this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Was it always kind of, I'll call like the entrepreneurial spirit of the rebellious side? Like, okay, I want to do this, but I actually just don't want to go into a high school and just teach and be a regular teacher.
Yeah.
I want to totally like break the system and do something different.
Yeah, I wasn't as clear when I was young that that's what I wanted to do, but I do remember thinking I really wanted to be an innovator and like revolutionary, like I really want to do like create shift paradigms. I don't think I had the language, but it was a feeling. And I ended up doing different jobs. Like when I was in DC, I was teaching Ethiopian immigrants like at night, and I was coaching basketball. And then I had a job where I worked with kids that didn't fit into the system and I would tutor them. And then, other jobs like that. And I was always kind of like playing around with it. And so again, it's like once you really say yes to what you're supposed to be doing, or kind of, like I said, that through line of mentoring. And so for me, the through lines, mentoring, teaching, and also innovation, and like seeing a different future, right? Sort of that visionary paradigm shift. And so that's always the way I've been. Like I can just see it. And as I've gotten more confident, and you mentioned, it's really about self-awareness, like knowing your body, knowing your patterns, knowing your, different versions of yourself that show up in different ways. Like all that self-awareness has really allowed me to say like, okay, this is what I really am good at, and this is what I'm not good at. And so I don't need to be messing around with things that I'm not good at, and just continue to lean into my greatness.
Yeah. And so, what was it like to see that first, charter school come to life, and then kind of what caused the shift from that point to kind of move on to the next thing?
Yeah, it's so interesting because, I quit my job at 30, and that was the kind of like decade moment. I think there's an interesting place. I mean, psychology has shown us this with a midlife crisis and the different, at the decade. I'm about to be 50, so I'm like, who knows what's going to happen at 50?
The next one's coming. What is it?
Exactly. But and I think I might have started a little early with my newest venture. But so at 30, I left and completely changed my life. And then at 40, my kids were 2 and 4 at the time. And I had started at this, to your question, I started this charter school organization that was totally visionary and was trying to disrupt education. And I started there as a teacher, and then it's called Summit Public School. It's still around. The model's actually in 300 schools across the country. But I started as a teacher, I started as a principal, and then I became the chief of schools, or like an assistant superintendent. And I had this moment when I was late 30s. I was like, I'm not happy again. I feel like I'm at the bank in terms of like, I was in the central office. I was the guy who was like, 40 people reporting to me. And it was like, it felt like it was back to the business world. Yeah, it was like competitive, high performing, all the things that just don't make my body feel good. And I had multiple back problems. I had multiple health issues, and I was like, I am not happy. And we went away to a little trip with our family to Lake Tahoe. And I was literally sitting with my then 4-year-old son, like holding him almost at the top of the mountain. Like it's now called the mountaintop moment, where he fell asleep, and I was just sitting with him. He was like right on my heart. And I'm like, oh God, I'm doing it again. Like I'm quitting the job and starting over. So again, I had this time I had like an executive job. I had the title, I had the mortgage, I had the white picket fence, like all the things.
All the responsibilities.
All the responsibilities. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not happy. And I was supposed to be there forever. Like everyone expected me to be there forever. Like I was one of the founders, and I was such a great fit. And I just was like, no, I'm going to start my own small school, and I'm kind of starting over. And so I literally went from the guy who was, had aligned to like Mark Zuckerberg's wife, because they were one of our biggest funders, and talking to all these sort of high powered people, and like people walking around the internal organization, like, hello, Mr. Richards, like that type of thing, right? Which was not me. To like begging a mom, like, do you want to enroll your 5-year-old in the charter school? Like it all happened in like a 1-month period. And so it was crazy, but it's like, I just knew, once again, I knew. And so it took me from that really great experience of 9 years of just growing so much, like personally, professionally, then to starting my own charter school. And then it's all led me to this moment, because everything you do kind of leads you to the next moment.
Yeah. And then, so what kind of got your brain shifting the idea from what you had created with the charter school to the micro school?
Yeah. I should say that one of the reasons I left that other job is because I did have my health breakdown and my spiritual awakening. I left out that like small detail,
Those are usually
which was massive.
Of why
And
we
they
make
usually
shift.
happen around, yeah.
But a lot
and
of
they usually happen around
people,
that time.
again, stay in the suffering or like, oh, it's just life for me now. My body, I'm getting older. My body's just doing things. I'm like, no, your body's giving you really loud signals now that you're not listening. And it's going to push you to that break point. And you can either decide to stay in suffering or you have to radically shift whatever it is.
Yeah. And so for me, I got Bell's palsy, which is paralysis of the face, at the end of the first year of launching my own school. So I really was like, I remember, I left Summit Public Schools and I told our founder, I'm like, I don't want to be the assistant coach anymore. Like, I want to be the head coach. And that was totally true. I really wanted to lead my own organization. So then I tried to kind of replicate what we did there and change it to like younger, because it was high schools and middle school. So I was like, I'll do a more elementary. And so I was still not wearing my authentic clothes. I was still trying to like, well, they're kind of like me because like their shirt's green and this one's blue, but I was still not in line with my full authenticity and my own truth. So I had this paralysis of the face and I took this parenting course, which I thought was a parenting course, but it was really about meditation and like really finding your authentic self. And my whole body shut down. Like, I couldn't, my whole face was paralyzed. I was having all these health issues. I had to take like 6 months off. And it was that journey that kind of led me to say, okay, I'm not creating from my own autonomy and my own sovereignty. I'm still creating from like what I did with that other organization to now creating it on my own. And I needed that transition, right? But it wasn't fully honest. And so I left after a few years and it was right before the pandemic hit. So now I'm like working at this place, I'm consulting, also kind of helping the school. Pandemic is like crazy. I'm like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
And then I decided to start this program that actually we later learned was based on internal family systems. So naming your inner children and the different part of you. I did that with a friend of mine for like 3 years. And that was how I paid the bills because there wasn't a lot of consulting options during the pandemic. But that was the transition to like, okay, now all of this that I've learned, I love coaching. I love helping people become entrepreneurs. And I really believe that schools should be smaller and that's like the future and that's going to help transition and transform the education system. So it all just kind of came together seamlessly because at this point, when you have the tools and the practices and you're not creating your own suffering and creating all the stories, you're like, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing. Great. Let me just go like start this company about, helping other people launch micro schools. And then I'm like, wow, that's everything I love to do and all the things I'm like really great at. And it's my own idea. I'm not trying to replicate something from somebody else. And so it's just been like so smooth and just flowing so amazingly. And there's still been a lot of stress. Like I had been paid for a year and a half. Okay. So like
yes, the
still a lot of stress.
Roller coaster, spiritually awake or not is always going to be a lot of work.
It's a ride. Exactly. It's the best catalyst, the best work you could ever do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, the more you're able to kind of find that calm and like be aligned with your purpose, the roller coaster can be fun. It can be a lot, but you handle it in a much different way when you aren't kind of, again, in that place of suffering and just feeling like it's such a grind. And you can see with the way I got asked an interesting question actually last week of like, what's the thing you hate most about what you have to do every day? And I was like, interesting. And I was like, I don't hate anything. And she's like, what do you mean? There's nothing that you don't like doing? I'm like, well, no, because I'm so lucky that I've gotten to take on clients and do this work. And like, it's changed and it's ebbed and it's flowed and it continues to evolve. And like, some days I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be it forever, but like, I'm just going to keep following it and see where it goes. Like, I actually don't know where this all goes. And she's like, oh, that's such an interesting way to look at it. That's just very strange to like, and you're like,
exactly.
do you hate a lot of your day? Like if you do, then maybe you want to look at it like a different way. Or again, if it's the lens that you look at how your work is, and like, that's really exhausting.
It is. And what we've done is it's totally exhausting and no judgment because we all have done it and we all do it.
Yeah.
Like the majority, 99% of the population does it. And the reason we've done it is because we actually believe the stories and the conditioning and the cultural programming. So for example, we've all basically signed, not all, but majority of us have signed a contract with mediocrity and essentially saying, like we talked about, I should stay at the bank and I should become one of these automaton like zombies that walk around me every day that are totally not happy and just clocking in and clocking out. And that's what I should do because I need safe retirement and I need a nice house and I need people to feel like I'm successful because my house is nice and my car is nice. All these things that we agree to. And there's a reason why there's a midlife crisis, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
But basically to that specific example, we believe in lack. We believe that lack has to be part of our lives. So we tell our kids and we tell, when I would mentor people, I'd be like, well, 70% of job you can love, but 30% is the stuff you're going to hate to do, right? So we say all these things and we create these stories and we create this conditioning within our own subconscious brain that makes us think I have to have a job where I don't like it a third of the time. And I'm sitting here like you are, Jenna, and being like, I actually like everything that I do all day, every day. And there's some things I like less. Like sometimes, I don't love everything. Oh my gosh. But here's the thing. The reason that's happening for the two of us is because, like you started in your introduction, I work from the inside out. And so I've done so much of that internal work when I had that health breakdown to really be clear about like lack is just a concept, to clear out the limiting beliefs, to clear out to be aware and to be self-aware when the story's coming up, to be aware of when I'm freaking out about the future and getting really specific, because then I know that'll calm down the part of me that's freaking out. But so there's all these tools and practices and the work that we have done to get us to a point where now the universe is matching our frequency and saying, you don't believe that you're supposed to have a job that's 30% boring or you hate now. So you're not going to get that. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to you to go like, it's not every day. And there's always somebody who kind of wants to push you back into like that suffering. And I had somebody bring up another thing. They're like, it's interesting what the universe is like kind of testing me right now. Like, we're going to throw some people in front of you and see if you can like stand in your own and grounded. And was like, yeah, well, maybe you don't want to do this. Like, I see you more as this, doing this. I'm like, okay, like, thanks. I don't
Exactly.
know. But like, are you trying to make me feel bad about like what I'm doing? Or just like you have a different expectation of me?
Yeah.
And like it's so interesting to really like check in, like let it go. And you have to like it always reminds
Yes.
you, oh, there's a little piece of you that maybe is still kind of concerned about how other people view you. And then it was funny, the next day I got to do this like great meditation. I went out in the forest and I was just like bouncing
Nice.
around and like playing with my dogs.
Yes.
Like, no. That's like, no,
Yep.
that's not it. We're gonna let that go and then like reset
Yep.
into like whatever we're doing. So it's definitely a constant like iteration for sure. And I'm curious, from the micro school component when you're building it. And as you mentioned, the roller coaster and the stress and like any high performer, we all get really good at being really productive. And we love a good list and just like check, check, check. You get like a lot of gusto, like energy sometimes when you were just like crushing through work. But also the kind of opposite is of being in this like hyper present state and like, surrendering into like the flow of things, which when you say both things side to side, don't necessarily always jive together. They're kind of on the polar opposites. So, as you're gaining this momentum and you're like, okay, I have something here. Like, we've got demand for it. Let's build this. How did you approach kind of taking everything you learned while scaling something new in a way that kept you kind of like in a baseline sort of state of operating?
Yeah, such a great question. It started as it always does with the breadcrumbs, with the kind of intuitive feelings. And it was several years ago when I was kind of going through the spiritual awakening that I would have like posters all over my walls with like, I'm like, oh, it's some sort of people are starting schools. They're also having like a spiritual journey. Oh, and they're entrepreneurs. Like, I didn't really know, but I just kept, because I was doing so much meditation after that time my health broke, when I had the health issues, I was really
Yeah.
just sitting. And I had 6 months off, so I had a lot of time to like reflect on my life. And so I just kept writing all these things and I kept just kind of crafting it. And I've heard certain, coaches and mentors I follow say sometimes it'll take several years till you actually manifest the structure of your kind of vision. And so it was like several years, but all these little pieces were leading up to it. And I feel like, to your point around what I call the change back attack, right? Like you move forward and then somebody mirrors back to you. Are you sure you want to be doing that? And what
Yeah.
they're actually really saying is 99% of what I say is projection. I'm really nervous right now that you're doing that because I don't know if I have the courage to do that. So because I care for you, I'm now going to tell you you shouldn't do that. So like if you can see it that way, like you were saying, and be like, oh, that's not mine, that's theirs. but I should maybe think about if it hit me a little bit, I should probably see, oh, that's a mirror. So that means I have something there that I got to work on, or maybe there's, and like you said, you went in and to the forest or, did your meditation, then you're like, oh, I know how to check with my own truth. And I'm like, that could have been really helpful. Maybe that person saying that could have like helped me realize I was not in line with my authenticity. And then you're like, no, I am. And so I just kept doing that, for several years. And it led me to start this program that I did with my friend for 3 years. And that was like so amazing. And then it led me to, I think I'm going to start a high school in Arizona, and I'm in California. It's like, oh, I think that's going to work. I didn't know why. So then I started pursuing that. And then I was like, let me get an advisory team together because, not anybody, but people that I really know and trust. And then I know that will hold me to a higher, like push me up higher than like push me down. So like, let me get, a small group around and just be like, here's the vision. What do you guys think? And then they started being like, oh, this is much bigger. And then they started reflecting back to me what I had been writing down for years. They're like, oh, this is scalable. Like you're doing this, you're doing that, like create this, create that. And I'm like, oh, so then I just went back and I started doing that. We had like 3 meetings. And by meeting 3, they were like, all right, so do you want 500 schools in 10 years? Or are you thinking like, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking 500.
Yeah.
And so it was just like a normal conversation. And we have laid off of that. We're at 100 in 10 years. But either way, like we were just playing in the vision and we were clear that there was a structure here. And, and it's like working through that and then having the right people around you is allowing me to just take one step at a time. And like I said, I thought I was doing this. And then how you get like the memories where you'll see something on LinkedIn and you're like, oh, wait, that was a year ago? Like I just posted that I was opening high school like 7 months ago or whatever, and I'm like,
it was like yesterday this was happening.
Like what? And then I don't even remember because I wasn't working through the logical brain.
Yeah.
I was working from the heart and the intuition, and then I was implementing with the logical brain.
Yeah.
And so then things started becoming more and more clear, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And some people that have watched me over the last, several years were like, it just always seems like you're kind of just following your intuition, then manifesting something.
Yeah.
And other people are like, it seems like you're all over the place. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to you. But anyway, so it just all came together, and it was the trust. And like you said, the trust and the surrender. And I think the universe is going to give you exactly what you need when you're ready for it. And so for me, I needed to kind of go through this one more time. There were a lot of lessons I needed to learn about the money piece, a lot of lessons about like really trusting, not going away from my truth and being like, this is it. And it's going to be hard financially. It might be, and it has been, because the way we built the business model is that we share revenue with the micro schools that open. So we don't get paid till they get paid. And so, they haven't opened yet. So we haven't gotten paid yet. But as always, like little things will happen. Someone will call me and be like, hey, could you facilitate a board retreat for us? I'm like, that's the $5,000 I needed, So these little things happen, and it always works itself out, and you just got to stay out of the stories and like stay true to, like you said, just surrender. And then I have a team. Like I have my coach that I've worked with for years. I have my, intuitive guide. I have all these different people that basically just mirror back to me what I already know. And it's really helpful. And then it helps me stay a little calmer and just keep moving forward one step at a time.
Yeah. And I'm curious from, a partnership dynamic, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who feel like, okay, I'm married, I have kids, I have responsibilities. So like, yes, I have that dream, but, I have bills to pay. And so I'm curious, how, you approach that with your significant other, and how you kind of are able to communicate in a way that kind of both gives you safety to allow kind of those bigger risks to happen. And so that maybe if somebody was listening, they're like, okay, I just got to jump. Because I always tell people, they're like, well, I just want to wait till this is this is done and this is done. And I want like the timing to be perfect. I'm like, let me tell you, nothing has ever been perfect timing. It has been like by force, usually, where I've been like, I quote unquote, like I feel like I'm pinned up against a wall. And I have a choice to stay exactly where I am or jump and hope for the best. And
Exactly.
I jumped.
Yeah.
Staying where I was just no longer an option.
Yeah. And that's what happens to a lot of us, is that we get to a point where we're like, I can't do this anymore. Like I can't be in this marriage. My coach would always say to a lot of these women that were leaving marriages, like in this group coaching I was in, she'd be like, you will know when your bags are packed and you're at the door. And it might be 15 years from now, it might be tomorrow. Like you will know. And it's the same when you're leaving a job, when you're leaving any kind of, like big life change. It's like when you know, you go, right? But to your question around the spouse, my wife has been amazing. Like I said, she was the only one who supported me back when I did that years ago when I left my banking job. But the other piece is it's so perfect because we're both working on different things. Like she's actually not entrepreneurial, but she's really like leaning into it. And so it freaks her out, but we're a good match because without her, I'd probably have like $500,000 in credit card debt. You know what I mean? Because I'd be like, let's go. Okay, whatever. Yeah, another 50 grand on that credit card. Yeah, I got a vision. And so she's kind of like, maybe you should do this and maybe you should cut expenses there. And I'm like, oh yeah. And my coach is always like, you need to lean on her to be partially your guide because she's really intuitive and she knows. And we have different ways of seeing the world and different personality
Different
types.
styles,
and so, yeah. And so, but really we had to work really hard on this. And I know I have done this multiple times where I've like quit a job or changed, and it's been hard for her.
Yeah.
But we've worked on it just like any relationship, and she's made me better and I've made her better. And so if your spouse is not on board, it's really hard. But I also think that at the end of the day, like it's your choice and you're the one doing the work and you can't change them. So I used to blame her. I used to be like, oh, the reason we're not doing this or that because she's thinking small and she's not
pulled me back.
Yeah. And then, all of my good teachers and coaches were like, everything's a mirror and everything's a projection. So if you're saying that she's scared, what you're saying is you're scared. Yeah. And so stop blaming her because, if you were able to do this, you would just do it and you wouldn't be blaming her. So we got to the point where we're able to really work through it. And, she's also doing a lot of the inner work. So we're able to have more conscious conversations and talk through it. And I can own my stuff. She can own her stuff. And we can realize that, it's not going to be perfect, but it's been hard for her. And putting stuff into details has really, really helped. Like I now have this like 7 TAD master budget because we'll have a conversation and she'll have a completely different way of thinking it than I do. And then I'll be like, let me put that in writing and like show you. And then she'll be like, oh, I see. We're just thinking about it in a very different way.
Yeah, I'm such a visual learner. So anytime I'm like, I'm not understanding, this is not gonna be like, if we can whiteboard it, if we can figure out some ways so we can look at it, then I think there's always some way to kind of see from both perspectives and understanding. Or if there is really like a radical disagreement in terms of
exactly.
like, no, like I'm still 110% that this is it. And if they're not, then I mean, obviously, yeah, room for discussion. But I love the kind of growing and working on it together. And sometimes I think if you're naturally the big vision, crazy idea person, somebody who I always call it kind of like pulls in the reins a little bit to like kind of save you from yourself in some aspects is like a very, very useful balance for sure. And so in terms of as you look forward and you mentioned not being, able to get paid until these schools take off. So for people listening from a micro school perspective, like what is the vision? What does the micro school look like? What is the size and kind of where are you at in terms of this, we'll call it like launching into the ether?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that question because now I can kind of put together all of the different pieces about what I've been sharing around like the vision and all of that. So what was clear for me around the vision and the values is I read this book called Reinventing Organizations, which is about the different shifts in organizational development from like military to school district to like Ben and Jerry's democracy and, consensus to this modern organization that they're calling the teal version of leadership and organizational development, which is about self-management, self-empowerment, and where people are actually empowered. And so I was really clear that, and again, I've been writing about it for 7 years, right? So I was really clear that this would be a decentralized organization where the people that were running the micro schools were actually autonomous, separate legal entities, and that they had sovereignty. And it was like their vision. It was not going to be a school in a box. So I kind of got clear on a lot of that. And then, but I also felt like I wanted to have a connection, like a values-based connection. And so the class that I had been teaching to adults and a lot of the life coaching I had done, we've now created a curriculum for kids called the Mind, Body, Soul, which is like a social emotional learning curriculum. So that's a piece that all of our founders have to agree to implement with their students and also do the work with themselves. And essentially, as a founder, you can start a micro school in your community. And a micro school is anywhere from 5 to 150 students. So most of our founders start with about 25 kids. And they bring in a vision. They're like, I really want this to be about like science and, projects, or I want this to be about Montessori and self-directed learning, like they bring in their own vision as educators. Typically educators, we have a few parents, but typically they're educators that are really tired of the system. So they bring in that vision. And then what we do is we provide them with the structures and the support. So then I get to go into my coach mode. And then I have a great partner who was a COO of a big a company that did tech camps called ID Tech. So they were super successful, and she helped them build that organization. And then she came and worked with me. So she creates all the resources. She kind of takes all the stuff out of my head and puts it into these beautiful, documents and structures. And so that allows us to empower individuals to have their own source of income and not be connected to another entity. So really to get out of corporate America and get out of like school districts, it allows people to follow their dream and to create what a lot of them start the conversation by telling me, I've always had a dream of opening my own school, but it seems so overwhelming. I'm like, well, I got the answer for you, because it's a micro school and we have a program, and now you get to be in a cohort of people. And so that's how all the pieces have come together. And it's going well when I was like, let me just start piloting stuff. So I put a job posting on LinkedIn to see like if anybody would be interested, or if I could, if I could even find people to do this. And I got 2,500 applicants in 3 months. So I put it out, and within a week, I'm like, oh, idea validated. Like, I can't even keep up. There are just so many people reaching out to me. And so from there, I was just like, okay, I'm going to find really amazing people from this 2,500. And I just narrowed it down, and I was like, okay, thank you. That's the first thing that my wounded inner child needed to know. Like, this is going to work. It's just a matter of building it and taking time. And so that's kind of the structure of what we're doing.
And have you seen any kind of trends or similarities in the people that you've spoke to who want to start their own school? Because from I think I'm like, I don't know too many people whose thought has been like, oh, I want to open my own school. It's usually different. So is it, majority of these people have kids already, and or are you like frustrated with the school system? Or is there any kind of like overarching connected themes where you're like, oh, this is really interesting, this is surprising or not surprising?
Yeah, interestingly enough, in education, there are a lot of people that are like, I've always had a dream to start my own school. And I think that's part of the problem with the system, because they're so disempowered that, especially the really great ones, are like, gosh, if I could just do this on my own, like I could make this about the kids, and I could actually have teachers be happy, and we could like have partnerships with parents. Like, they know what makes them great at their job. And typically in a traditional education system, you got these like little, an oasis at the back of the school where this teacher's just working magic, and they're like staying away from all the politics and all, they're like working. So they're like, I could just do this on my own. So it's more common than you would think. But what I would say is the person who's most successful is they want to start their own school, but then they realize that starting your own school is like starting any entity. As you know, Jenna, like 9 out of 10 new businesses fail in the first year, right? And again, these are the types of facts people like me say out loud. So now you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this because 90% fail. And then you start to believe that's true. However, there's some logic to it, and you actually have to have a good plan, and you have to be able to. So the people that are most successful are the ones that actually understand this is an entrepreneurial endeavor. They also have a connection to the mind, body, soul piece. So that right there, if they don't bring that up in like the first, few parts of our conversation, I'm like, that's okay. But if that's not interesting to you, then it might not be the right fit. So these are people that are like really ready to level up, and they want to become entrepreneurs, and they want to start a school that's kind of been their vision for years, and they're just looking for the right support and the right structure. And so what we learned with our first cohort is I think the biggest value we're giving that we didn't realize is helping an educator change their mindset from 9 to 5 educator, I have to follow the rules at the bottom of the totem pole, to I get to be my own boss. And now it's a lot of responsibility, and it's really scary, but it's a lot of autonomy. And like, this is crazy. And like we've been talking about, it's a wild ride. And so they'll ask me in the interview, like, oh, so when do I get my paycheck? And what is my salary? And do I get benefits? And I'm like, I don't know. You're going to have to make all that happen. And if you're successful, you can set up your own insurance and your own salary and all that. If you're not going to get any of that. So I'm not guaranteeing any of that to you. And if you have the mindset that this is your dream, and you're saying yes to your calling, you have a full body yes, then you're going to go through this process and you're going to make it. You're not going to be like freaked out by it all. And so that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you thought about kind of the disruption component, and obviously, education and the issues surrounding education. I mean, Canada has it, but I'll just say it's a bit louder in the US in terms of kids receiving proper education. So many state schools, like, they're behind in learning. Obviously, mind body. Some practices in certain schools are kind of like, some teachers usher it in as a way to kind of rebel a little bit from the traditional structure. As all these schools start to open, do you see kind of like a shift of like, well, like government funded traditional schools and teachers kind of like evaporating? And then there's just a series of kind of new wave, new models of schools where it's like, people are going to go, parents are going to take their kids of which kind of, school function adheres best to their kids' personality and like learning abilities.
Yeah, such a great question. And what we saw, I think the pandemic really shifted a lot, like we know in the
Yeah.
world in general. But I think in the education space, I think people, homeschooling was kind of the far left, the far right, right? And it was people that were kind of pretty outside of the mainstream. Nowadays, I get phone calls all the time like, hey, how can I homeschool my kid? I'm like, well, you should look into a micro school because then you don't have to homeschool your kid, but it's similar to a homeschool experience. And
Yeah.
so that changed. I think we saw as parents, I'm a parent, so I'm saying we saw as parents like what was happening to our kids on the Zoom school and how it just wasn't very effective. No fault of the teachers, but like how these big bureaucratic institutions can't pivot quickly.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you just have unprepared teachers and kids sitting around and it was a disaster. We saw that, we spent billions of dollars on education just to help during the pandemic. And if anything, scores went down and got worse and kids are less happy, teachers are less happy. So I think we're at this turning point, especially in the US, but it's actually worldwide. And part of our
Yeah.
vision is to go international. We already have phone calls and my COO is always like, David, kind of like my wife, David, we're not going international yet. I'm like, okay, in a few years. But
Yeah.
basically, we're hearing the same story across the world, which is schools were built for factory models. And I think we're hitting this turning point where people are tired of it, especially the parents, but
Yeah.
especially the children and especially the teachers. And so people are looking for a way out, which is why my post, got 2,500 applicants in such a short amount of time. I wasn't even using like the LinkedIn recruiter. It wasn't even a good strategy. And I still got so much,
Yeah.
I had so much success. So people are really tired of it. We're at a turning point. I think there's a shifting in the paradigm in general, like more people waking up, more people wanting to do things that are not top down and command and control. So it's just like there's an environment for it, which is why I received the messages 7 years ago in my meditation, because the universe doesn't work in timelines. It works in like, here's your path. And so I've always been a disruptor and I've always tried to think about ways to help people. I'm not an in the system reformer. I'm definitely outside of the system reformer. And so now there's like a structure to it. And I do not think these micro schools will replace the traditional system. I think it'll be more like a Netflix to the cable system kind of situation, right? Think about Netflix, like, what is it, 10, 15 years ago? They shut down Blockbuster. And then it was like, wait, what? And now they have these videos for sale or to mail. And then it became live, what do you call it? Like video streaming. And now we're just like, we all have Hulu and this and that. And it's very normal. And the cable company's still around,
Yeah.
but like they have to change with it and they have to think about what they're going to do. And so I think it's going to be that type of disruption. Like the school district will change. The school district will have to figure out, what are we doing? Because now all these parents are basically saying, we can empower ourselves and move our kids from the system. And now there's a lot of states that are actually creating these education savings accounts or vouchers, which is a bad word in some circles. But at this point, we're looking for ways for parents to be empowered. And so if parents can start voting with their feet and start to leave these traditional systems, then it's going to push on that behemoth system to be like, we got to do something differently. We got to start our own micro schools, or we got to figure out how to treat teachers where they actually want to be here. And so the hope is that this will be kind of one of those, I think it's called Disruptive Innovation by Clayton Christensen. And the idea is that you're disrupting, this little tiny thing is disrupting the big market, and it starts to create change because there's enough market factors for the tipping point to actually change. So that's what I see happening with microschools in the next like 10 years, because
Yeah.
we're growing so fast. And then in the next 30, I see kind of that larger system disruption.
And how are you looking at AI? Because I was getting, I was at a conference and it was just the biggest topic. And, a lot of, we'll call it the very tech focused leaders were like, Oh, yeah, school is out, you're gonna have AI teachers, they're gonna be doing everything for you. Obviously, the big and I keep talking about, like, AI is amazing, like, obviously, it's allowing us to do things faster and is in terms of a tool for productivity, super cool. We're not quite there yet, I think it's gonna get way worse before it gets better. What I hope and what I feel is that there is gonna be, much like the school side, a natural rebellion of, like, no, I don't want this. I do want human connection and interaction and community. I just think the model in which it's going to happen is not going to be, what everybody thinks it is. There's that universal basic income kind of idea and getting credits and being good with people. But from a teaching and education perspective, how are you looking at that in terms of the school structure and setup?
Yeah, well, I think this is why we need reform even more than ever, because you're looking at a system that, like, for example, my son's going to high school and I just printed him an article last night and we're going to read it together. I printed it because I'm old. I sent it to him on
I
text.
love that you put it. I was like, ooh,
I sent it him via
real.
text and I'm like, he might read it. He might not. He's 14, but I'm going to print it and like put it in his face at dinner tonight.
Yeah.
But basically the arguments from Peter Diamandis, who is, one of these guys who really pushes the envelope. And he was basically saying that the school system is set up to not be able to have AI work, right? So you're going to have kids going and writing essays, for example, as one example, at home, turning them in. And the study he released from MIT was that 83% of students that do that don't remember anything they just put on their paper. And so his point was, I'll make my point. My point is that we need to create schools where you learn how to learn. And this is the argument I've always made for technology in schools. Like, because you get old, you've gone through it several times. It's like 15 years ago, it was all about like, we're going to have these apps and these digital tools and you replace teachers. And then before that, it was some other, technological revolution. And so basically AI is another version of that at a massive scale and a massive like 10,000x or whatever, exponential technology is going to be. But if you don't have students that can think for themselves, if you don't have schools that are doing projects, if you don't have schools that have structures for self-direction, if you don't have schools that have human connection, like social emotional learning, and if you're not teaching kids how to be emotionally intelligent, all those things, we're in big trouble. And our current school system right now is not set up to do any of those things. So kids,
Yeah.
now what we're going to do, I'm telling you right now, it's already happening. Teachers are going to start becoming police officers that are checking to see if kids are using AI to cheat. That's not going to help us. It's not going to be fun for the teachers, and the kids are just going to keep getting smarter at how to trick the teachers.
Of course.
Rather, what we should do is create, like, one example would be create micro schools where instead of giving the kids an essay to write, you teach them how to use AI to create something. And then like it's all about the questions. It's all about, like, how do you think and how do you learn? So now you're like, AI, what if I wanted to da 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 da? And then they do the research for you and they give you all the information. Now your job is analysis and your job is presenting it and all the human skills. Your job is connecting with another human to tell them what you're trying to explain and all those things. So it is a real opportunity for micro schools. And because we're small, anytime you're trying to do something different or innovative, you can like change something on a dime. So you can you can use the lean startup, build, measure, learn methodology and be like, I'm going to test this AI, tool with my kids today, with my 12 kids in my micro school. Oh, that was terrible. I'm going to do something different tomorrow, as opposed to a school district that takes sometimes 3 years to change their curriculum because it's superintendent and board votes, like parent feedback. And all of a sudden AI in 3 years, like that's so long. So I think we have an amazing opportunity with AI to be able to teach like the basics, like just knowledge that kids can just get like that. I've been saying this for years. Like you can Google it. Now you can use AI and it gives it to you. My daughter yesterday, she looked up a recipe for what she was doing and she goes, oh, should I use the recipe that AI gave me? Like she was like shirking. And I'm like, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you? She's like, it summarized all the best ones and it gave me a recipe for red velvet cupcakes. I was like, why would you spend 10 minutes looking for the best recipes if it's already summarized it? Why don't you try it and then see if it works? So
Yeah.
I'm really excited about AI and I'm also really scared to death. And I think that in the education space, it could be done really well, but unfortunately in the system we have, it's going to be done really poorly. So we
Yeah.
need other people like micro schools doing it on the side and creating real change.
Well, and it's already fascinating. I saw an article and they had the brain scan side by side, one who like just used ChatGPT for everything and one with the critical thinking and how the brain's lit up and all these functions are lighting up. And then ChatGPT is like this one dot. I'm like, yeah, there's already a problem with a lack of being able to like critically think through things. So like I'm scared that like that's just gonna be like, oh, I don't know. And then it's always just somebody else is gonna tell me the answer. I don't actually have to problem solve this through, which is very scary.
And for us, the through line of the mind, body, soul piece was always very clear to me intuitively. I knew that had to be part of what we were doing. And it's like you put AI next to that. And like AI basically mimics human behavior. So we have a bunch of unethical people that aren't feeling. One of my friends actually asked me, like, yeah, I used an AI therapist and was like, yeah, I'm paying like $500 a month for this coaching program. Should I just go to AI? Like, she was actually serious. And I'm like, AI will never have a heart. It'll never have a spirit. It'll never have a soul. So you can use it as like a companion a little bit, or like someone to ask basic psychological questions because it can do all but the heart and the soul, like we need that in our schools. And so for us at Changemaker, we're having mind, body, soul be the central piece of all of this, because as we have this crazy technology taking off, we need people to remember that it's the human element that's always going to connect us.
And that kind of sort of like leads me to, it's interesting as I've always had lots of entrepreneurs around me, but as I get to talk to more and more people, it's so interesting, everybody's level of trauma. And I find with entrepreneurs and anybody deciding to do, there's always something that's happened and it's caused this shift for them to, use that for good. And I call it like a little bit of the chip on the shoulder to kind of go and prove yourself, because you're still kind of looking to be like, I'm worth it. And you got to kind of balance those things out. So I'm curious, for people kind of listening, what would be your advice for those still kind of navigating and healing, and kind of moving into their transformation phase of like whatever that is of, we chatted bits and pieces about it, but if you can kind of like synthesize it into, a recommendation.
I love it. And I've noticed that throughout my life that like I read Steve Jobs' book and, I've read a lot of the different entrepreneurs that we hold up. And I'm like, oh, like there's some serious inner child healing that needs to go on there, right? And then I started in the charter space. The people that I really connected with that were creating these amazing charter schools and scaling them, they always had this like rebellious side to them, like screw the school district, like, and I'm going to serve my kids, these kids that have never been served by the district, like they really have this like anger. And like you said, they channel it to action and they channel it to vision. It's amazing to watch. And imagine if you could do both. Like you could actually heal those parts of you and still have that passion for change. And then as you're doing it, you're not doing it from a place of lack or competition or fear or proving yourself. Because I did that for years. It's like, let me go get that Berkeley degree, that Stanford degree. Let me work for the best charter school organization in the country. Let me, fill in the blank. And it was like, I'm going to prove to all these people that I'm worthy. So if you really peel everything down, at the end of the day, a lot of entrepreneurs have trauma about not feeling worthy, not feeling like they fit in. And that's why they create these amazing things that change the world, because they're not in the normal mainstream paradigm. So we have a gift which needs to be shared, but you really have to do the inner work. And so find it, whatever it is for you, find a place to do it. I don't recommend traditional therapy. If that works for you, that's great. But I'm talking about like not talk therapy for 25 years. I'm talking about like real work where you go in and like, if it's, Tony Robbins, or pick your thing, or if it's something more spiritual that's like doing silent retreats, just pick what it is, get clear on what's actually driving you and use that to drive you, but actually use it from a place of love and not a place of disconnection and fear. And it's so much more fun. And then you're not like constantly fighting and battling. And so, yeah, I love this so much about entrepreneurs. And I feel like I had a fear that if I healed myself too much, I would not have the anger and the drive to keep changing things. And it did kind of happen for a while. I was like, I don't really care about creating change anymore. Like, I'm just happy. I'm just sitting here, under the tree or whatever. But that was just part of the integration process of like really trying to see how it could integrate it all. Now I'm like, no, I'm here to create change. This is my mission, but I'm going to disrupt with love. And I'm going to do it in a way that if someone starts yelling and screaming at me, someone asked me like, what's the flack you're getting for disrupting $800 billion education industry? And I'm like, I'm not getting a lot necessarily, because I'm not out there fighting with people in the boxing ring. I'm just like, here's what we're doing and here's what's happening. And if they don't like it, that's fine. But yeah, so I think it's a great question.
Yeah. And because you mentioned Tony Robbins,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, for a mindset shift, I'm a big like dance party component. If I can't, like, I'm feeling it in, I'll like turn whatever and I'll like dance. I've had friends come over while I'm working and they're like, do you just dance in your kitchen? I'm like,
I love
sometimes
it.
I just have to. And I was like, because I have
Yes.
to create a shift from what I was just doing, and it could have been kind of dark and stormy, or you're doing a
Yes.
restructuring and laying people off, to like, oh, now I got to go jump into another person and be like this whole other thing, and I got to move my energy around to do it. So I'm curious if you have like a go-to song that you blast to kind of like get out of your head or shift from a certain type of mode.
Yes. Okay. Katy Perry, Roar. And
It
last
is
time we
so
talked
good.
about this, I couldn't remember, but it's Katy Perry, it's Roar. And
Yeah.
speaking of an entrepreneur with a lot of inner child issues, the gentleman, I think it's Adam Newman, who started WeWork, super
Yeah.
visionary, and had this like, it's a crazy story. Watch the documentary or
I
the,
watched it on Apple
oh, you
TV.
did on Apple
Wild
TV.
story, yes.
Watch it because it's like the classic entrepreneurial story. Like he just had a vision. It was almost like not realistic, but he pulled it off, and now they're still around. And he walked out with, I don't know how much money, but a lot of money. And he was just working everybody with his vision,
Yeah.
right? And everybody was just eating out of his hand, and then it all just went south. But I
Yep.
actually did it because he left with tons of money. But anyway, so that song in the show, they actually, every time he walked into the one in Manhattan, I believe they had to play it as soon as he walked in the door. And so like when I'm having one of those moments, I'm like, yes, I want to hear those words, because that's the highest version of me. That's like, yes, hear me roar. Like I'm unstoppable, all the things it says. So
I love it. And if you could choose one superpower that you would want the most, what would it be?
to be psychic, which I feel like we already have, we all have. So I would just want to really hone in on those gifts a little bit more.
Yeah, I love it. And then what's one book or podcast that you would recommend to kind of anybody to listen to or read?
Yeah, I'm really looking for more books that are turning the page on leadership. So that's why I liked Reinventing Organizations, because I think it's like totally radical and out there. And so that's one. And I would recommend the illustrated version, because the actual book itself is like really dense, but the illustrated version is like so easy to read. And I think you can just get the PDF online now without even have to pay. But the other book I recommend is The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And so it's all about what we've been talking about, like doing the work as a leader, making sure that you know that everything you're doing is, being self-aware. What projections are you bringing? What baggage are you bringing to the table if you're building an organization? So now your organization is going to have that baggage. So it's an amazing book, like just from a spiritual perspective, it's
Yeah.
amazing. But what they've done is they've translated a lot of the spiritual concepts into very corporate, like business language. And they have workshops. But anyway, the book is amazing, and I've been using it for years.
I love it. And then in your own words, how would you define Built for This?
Oh, great question. I would define it as somebody who is clear on their mission and their calling, and they know exactly what they should be doing at each moment. Not over 10, 15, 20 years. Just, I know what I'm built for this, and this is what I'm doing in this moment, because I'm clear and I'm stepping forward, and I'm trusting, and I'm letting go. My phone says what I want is not an outcome. So it's like you're just stepping each moment into the next call, the next thing that you're supposed to be doing. And from there, you build amazing things.
I love it. And so if anybody listening is super passionate about what you're up to and wants to get in touch with you or wants to start a micro school, what is the best way to go about learning more and being able to see if there's a fit and how to go about doing something like that?
Yeah, 3 places to check. So changemakereducation.com is our website. So that's real easy. Everything's on there. Follow us on LinkedIn at Changemaker Education. And then finally, we have a podcast called Changemaker EDU. And you can find that on all the places you listen to your podcasts, and you can kind of hear our stories, and we, interview our current founders, and super fun. So that's the best way to keep in touch.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking time. It was so great to chat with you, and I look forward to staying connected.
Thanks, Jenna. It was a blast.
Thank you.